This is the first in a series of 8 lessons by Jack Boland entitled Techniques for Creative Living. First, I would like to take a moment just to welcome you to this class this evening. And I would like to welcome also those persons who will be hearing this series of lessons on cassette tape. You are very much a part of this experience. I want you to feel that you're sitting here in class with us, over 400 of us. And to those of you who are listening on tape, I know that you are surprised when you hear me speak to you. But I wish you could look out upon this audience and see the bright and shining, eager faces that I see. Well, yours is one of them. Would you like to know how to operate from strength? Be one of those persons that is always moving from one experience, from one event, from moment to moment, hour to hour, day to day, functioning from strength, not the victim of any circumstance. This doesn't necessarily mean that you always come out on top. You don't win every hand. But even if you seem to lose for a moment, it doesn't deter you, nor does it disturb you. As a matter of fact, it even causes you to press forward more eagerly. Would you like to be such a person? How would you like to learn to become effective in any circumstance? Regardless of what's happening, you can pause, become aware of yourself and of an energy and intelligence greater than yourself, and move forward, coping adequately, more than adequately. How would you like to be treated as you would like to be treated by all the people who exist in your world? And if they don't treat you that way, then they stop existing in your world. How would you like to be the kind of person that has learned how to eliminate not only your own unacceptable behavior, but also to give other people a choice to diminish their unacceptable behavior in your life, and if they don't, then they've made a choice? How would you like to be that kind of person? To be creatively alive in every situation, to learn how to live and love and laugh and be happy. It's possible for you. As a matter of fact, you have the responsibility to learn to do just exactly what I've described to you. You were born, you were created to be this person of this consciousness. But the ability to function the way that I've described is not developed at your mother's knee. The reason being that your mother didn't function that way, nor your father, nor your uncle, or the rest of them, unless they were extraordinary people. I'm talking about becoming an extraordinary person. How would you like to cut through a lifetime of emotional red tape once and for all and achieve firm control of who and what you are? To discover who you are and to be who and what you are most of the time. And then when you forget, to be able to quickly remember and snap right back into a centered position of adequacy. Would you like that? Well, this is the first in a series of 8 lessons on how to live your life this way. And one must learn how and to develop techniques, because the kind of life that I'm talking about is not of the earth. It is not of our earthy human consciousness. It is a fourth dimensional experience. How would you like to stop being controlled or dominated by other people? Would you like that? Or circumstances? I know the answer. I know what your response to that would be. Now, virtually everyone suffers some domination by other people that's unpleasant and definitely not worth maintaining, let alone defending. And in a very strange way, we have a tendency to defend our weaknesses, especially if someone controls us. Startling how that is. How we explain very carefully why we're in this situation. We explain it to others and to ourselves. Now, most people know all too well what it is to get ripped off, manipulated, and pushed into behaviors and beliefs that are against their will. As a matter of fact, the problem of being victimized by other persons and corporations, businesses that sometimes are set up just because they successfully know how to take advantage of victims. You see, there are lots of people who like to be victimized. And today I was reading in Action Line, that's a column in one of the newspaper that is there for victims. People who are victimized write and call Action Line or one of the other columns to get the newspaper to do for us that which we have not been successfully able to do for ourselves, and it works. If you get the focus of consciousness on someone who has ripped you off or taken advantage of you, then frequently there is a change on the part of that person. Now, while this is a good and worthy service, and there are certain governmental agencies that are set up to do just exactly that, to protect you and me, and I'm glad that they're there, and I hope they don't go away. But while these are worthy services that are provided, they don't get to the problem. They only scratch the surface of victimization. And the reason that they don't get to the real problem is that these services emphasize placing blame on the victimizers. The idea being, if we could get rid of victimizers, then no one would be a victim, right? Wrong. The reason that we have victimizers is that we are a race of victims. We stand around patiently waiting for someone to come and take advantage of us in many forms. And you don't have to wait very long until here he comes. They will relieve you of the money that's in your wallet in small or large increments. They will. They know exactly how to convince you that you need that product that you didn't know you needed until a moment ago, and it'll take you 5 years to find out why you bought it, and by the time you do, it's outmoded. We are victims. So the problem is not to get rid of victimizers first. If we should eliminate or could eliminate the consciousness of being a victim, then we might find in a very short time that we would not have so many victimizers. You see, the problem of being victimized rests in you and in not those other people or companies who have learned to pull your strings. Now, the word victim comes from a Latin word meaning animal used as a sacrifice. And I'm sure that there have been times in your life when you have thought, boy, am I on the sacrificial altar or block. Look what they're doing to me. Victim is defined as a person who is tricked, swindled, or taken advantage of, a dupe. And the word victim comes from a language root source that develops words that are connected with magic and religion or trickery or sorcery, such words as guile, cunning, craftiness, wizard, witch, bewitch, or to cast a spell. And as a matter of fact, if you're a victim of anything, it's only because you've permitted someone to cast a spell, or you have cast a spell over your own mind. In any given situation, the chances are that you and I will either be a victim or a victor. The word victor is defined as one who defeats or vanquishes an adversity. And it comes from the Latin word meaning to conquer. Also to convince or to evict. Now, to become a victor in the sense that we are describing and defining this evening does not mean that you take advantage of another person. It does not mean that you overpower another person. We're talking about becoming a victor over old, limited, and self-immobilizing concepts and ideas. To convince yourself that you are a victor, that you're no longer a victim, and to evict from yourself, from your consciousness, those concepts that have made it possible for others to take advantage of you. No one has ever taken advantage of you without your permission. You helped them every step of the way. They could not do it except through your cooperation. It's been my experience that most people are handicapped by their lack of self-confidence and by their lack of understanding more than by any situation or condition into which they may have been born or in which they may have found themselves for any reason. You see, we, and that's most of us, simply do not know how to handle ourselves in most of life's important situations. And until we can take charge of ourselves, we can never take charge of a situation. And we've always tried to handle it the other way. We've tried to take charge of events and conditions and relationships and persons. This is why that some people try to control their environment by inducing fear and guilt in other persons. They have believed that if we can just get them to do what we want to do, then we're in control and all is well. And then the person that we control is a victim, but also the person who is the controller becomes a victim of their own belief system, because that's a self-defeating belief system. Most of us have normal, fully functioning mental and emotional faculties. There's nothing wrong with the mechanism. The machinery is okay. The computer is perfect. The programming is the problem. It's what we've programmed into the computer. And we have handicapped ourselves and victimized ourselves with faulty belief systems about ourselves and about life, about God, religion, sex, the economy, all kinds of things. We've limited ourselves in our search for happiness and for security. And then, more than that, we have limited ourselves further by permitting other people to use our own limitations against us. We've even shown them where our buttons were, and we've said, here, push this button and I will react in a certain way. And if button number 1 doesn't work, then here's number 2. Bing. And they keep us confined into that little narrow framework that we have consigned ourselves to. And we wonder, how could this have happened to someone with my background and my brilliance? Now, this series of lessons is only for those people who feel strongly about not being manipulated by others or by your old limiting responses to life, by your fears, by those vague imaginings that have at certain moments of your life caused you just at the moment when you were about to become a winner to fall back into the loser category again. And you know what I'm talking about. How would you like to walk around on this planet with the feeling of really being born again, a new person, awake, alert, alive, and enthusiastic, really on top of things? You can have that experience. And that's what this series of lessons on techniques for creative living are for. But I warn you before we get into this series of 8 lessons, that you must be aware that most people are more content to be regulated than they are willing to take charge of their lives. We live in comfort zones, and what is more important than what can be. And we don't mind having our strings pulled. We're like little marionettes, and we're just sitting up here, and there are all the strings. And we are so accustomed to having our strings pulled, and we wave our little arms, and we nod our little heads, and we think we are in charge of our lives, and we have not been in charge of our lives at all. And if you can see the mechanism, and then know that it's possible to escape from that type of living, it becomes one of the most exciting concepts that can be presented to us. Now, some of the things that I'm going to talk about will seem pretty risky. Not so much this evening. And some things will make you feel pretty shaky. But get honest with yourself, and you will see that you really don't have very much to lose. Change is threatening and frightening to most people. We don't mind changing a little bit, but let's really don't get too far out with this concept of change. I'm doing pretty good, thank you. A basic premise of our class is that to your own giant self be true, and then it follows as night the day, that you will be true to every person who lives upon the earth, and to the Creator who placed you here to achieve your ultimate freedom. You and you alone must decide how you're going to live your life. And as long as you exercise your right of choice without infringing upon the rights of others, then you have the right to not be controlled and not be victimized by another person, as long as you do not attempt to control or take advantage of that other person. Now remember that another name for victim is loser, one who accepts defeat. And I'm telling you that anyone on earth can change from a victim into a victor, from a whiner into a winner, from a loser who dislikes his every moment into a lover who adores and rejoices and gives thanks for each experience that occurs and accepts every challenge head on. I know that's true. I've seen it happen. I'm looking at some faces, people to whom it has happened, and it has happened to me. You never need be a victim again, but in order to begin to function as a non-victim, it is important that we take a searching and fearless inventory, or look at the areas and the numerous situations in which you've let other people and other situations and institutions pull your strings. Now, the key word is control. If you are not in control of your life, then something or someone else is. If you're not in control of your moods, of your attitudes, then something or someone else is. If you still believe, for example, that depression is normal and natural and is something that one must experience monthly, then you will draw to yourself the persons and the situations that I will guarantee you, will put you into a depression with great regularity. If you're not in control of your life, conditions and persons will be in control of your life. Now, when I'm talking about a victim, I'm not talking about someone who has been taken advantage of through some criminal activity. I'm talking about those of us who simply are not in charge of our lives. Now remember that victims almost always operate from personal weakness. You're a victim when your life is not working for you and when you're functioning in self-defeating ways. When you're not free. When you're not free to experience what intuitively you've known you wish to experience. When you are not free to break out of the patterns that have displeased you and displeased others, then you're a victim. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And we're talking about a process wherein that one begins to develop techniques of self-mastery. And you do this not so much at the grand scale in one fell swoop, but you begin to take charge of yourself in the normal and natural relationships that develop in your life and in those events, those moment-to-moment events that occur each day. You see, we live our lives daily. And it is in the daily experience, the natural events in which we react in an unnatural way. This is where we begin to establish that control. I just happen to remember that with great regularity, I perform a wedding ceremony. Wedding ceremony is right here in front of where I now stand. And a part of that wedding ceremony is a special part when I will read a portion of Gibran's The Prophet on marriage to the couple being married. And they will nod and smile, love each other, and know that they understand exactly what I mean. Sometimes months later, we are sitting in a counseling situation downstairs, and they did not fully hear what I'm going to read to you at this moment. Now, if you have ears to hear what I'm about to read. Then our matron spoke again and said, "What of marriage, Master?" Now, marriage is one of the most natural relationships that evolve in some of our lives. And the prophet said, "Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let love rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each of you be alone, even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. Give your heart, but not into each other's keeping, for only the hand of life can contain your hearts. Stand together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow." You've heard those words and loved them. And the great spiritual lesson is this: never, ever, as long as you walk upon this earth, ever turn your will and your life over to the care of another person, including and especially your spouse. Marriage was never intended to be a relationship in which you lost your identity or in which you lost your freedom. Are you aware of how often when a couple is about to get married, one or the other will say, "Well, I've only got a few more minutes." My freedom is gone. It's all over. In just a few more minutes, I'm going to stop being me. You are going to take charge of some aspects of my life. I'm going to have to report in to the new master sergeant, who will be very dismayed if I do not report in. Hurt, wounded. Where were you? Supper was ready. Well, I was trying very hard to get here. I was angry at the traffic tie-up, those slow drivers ahead of me, because I knew that if I did not get here, you would be upset, so I was upset with them. Now, what kind of life pattern are we getting into with that kind of thinking? That is really turning the strings of our heart and of our mind, of our whole lives, over to the care of another person, who then becomes a kind of control. No, marriage was not supposed to be that kind of a relationship. We're on this earth to overcome, to obtain our freedom. Now, I'm not talking about the kind of freedom that becomes license. No, we're here talking about a system of ideas that permits us to grow and to become, to evolve into the marvelous person that we were destined to be, and living with and working with other people who are also finding their freedom. So we are working together in a system of self-support and wherein that each one becomes more and more of what that person is. I'm also not talking about a system of ideas in which you can expect to have your own way in everything that you do. You're not going to win every hand. You're not going to score every time you get the ball. And that does not matter. The thing that does matter is that you at least do not expect to become upset or immobilized with anger or resentment or fear, any of the negative emotions. And you don't get anxious about anything that goes on in your life. It's possible for you to live every moment of your life without anxiety or without stress. Now, stress is necessary in life, but my reaction to stress must not be distress. It does not have to be distressful. And you might think, well, Jack, what you're talking about is not normal. And that's absolutely correct. If you want to be normal, it just might be time for you to go home, because normalcy will kill you. It's normalcy that we're breaking out of into another dimension that is above the ordinary, but not above the natural, supernatural. There is a dimension of life in you that cannot be confined in these little packages and these small containers and concepts in which we have limited ourselves. And so I'm talking about developing a new kind of intelligence, a new way of thinking about everything, a reevaluation of each thing that occurs in your life, observing how you have reacted, and then beginning to observe how you could react in that particular situation, so that you don't find yourself deliberately getting into a self-defeating situation. Let me give you an example. There's a certain airline that flies airplanes and people around this country that is famous for its conveyor belts that chew up your luggage. And this airline takes longer to get your luggage from the plane to the ramp than it takes to get you from Dallas to Detroit. Or at least these are some of the complaints about this airline. Now, I try to avoid that airline, but sometimes I have to fly this airline. I will not tell you which one it is. If you have flown it, you know. But when I must fly this airline, I play the little game of enjoying the excitement that I'm going to experience. And you would be amazed at some of the exciting little things that occur to me. Last winter, for example, and this was just one of the experiences of last year on this airline, I spoke here in our church at the 9 and 11 o'clock service, and then ran out to the airport to catch my flight to Tucson. I was speaking in Tucson, Arizona at 8 o'clock that evening. And the flight took me to Dallas, and I changed planes. Different airline out of Dallas. Now, the airline of which I speak, when they took me aboard in Detroit, canceled my reservation from Dallas to Tucson. Now, no one could explain why. So I got off in Dallas and leisurely walked over to catch my flight to Tucson, and only to discover that I was not on the computer any longer. I'd been canceled. And I said, oh, this is the experience I'm about to have. Now, I'll guarantee you that there were a couple of my strings that were wanting to be pulled, and I said, no, I'm not going to be a victim of this airline, and I'm not going to let them be a victim of me either, because I have been known in times in the distant past to be prone to victimize people who did not do what I wanted them to do, especially if they got my name lost in that computer. And so I took myself over to the counter and asked the person who was there, realizing that that person had nothing to do with it. Do you know that when this happens, that dear person standing there, rushed and harried and oppressed by a bunch of people like us standing in line, that dear lady had nothing to do with my lost reservation. And I had to remember that, didn't I? And so I asked her sweetly if there was any way to get me on the plane, and she said, no, we can't even get you on the waiting list. It's full and backed up. And I said, is there a supervisor here? And she said yes, and showed me to the supervisor, and I went to the supervisor, and the supervisor was having a very busy day. And I was not a part of his business. And I said, is there a supervisor of supervisors? See, if we're not going to be victims, if you've decided that you're not going to be a victim, don't start fussing and fighting, because in that moment you are really a victim of the system that is there. If you don't believe it, you try it. And he said, yes, there is, and showed me to this precious lady who was the supervisor of supervisors. And I made my way over to her and smiled, and I did something that I'm not prone to do. I let her know up front in a casual way that I was a minister. That was rather sneaky, and I don't often pull that. And she said, oh, my father is a minister. Let's see what we can do about you. And I traveled from Dallas to Tucson first class. Well, what happens when you find yourself in that kind of a situation? If you're not careful, one of the old ideas will come out that says, well, I know I can't win. I know I can't get on that flight. Or I get upset when someone does this to me. Or the little guy really doesn't have a chance, does he? No, it's always this way when you travel with that airline. Or I'll show those sons of guns. Well, you wait. They'll show you, and you'll be waiting in the airport. That's what will happen. Or you might say, well, I hope they don't get mad at me for asking. And I'll walk up here in my timid little voice, and I will say, you really don't have a place on this plane for me, do you? And they'll say, no, we really don't. The next one, we do. Or you can say, well, they'll probably think I'm stupid if I tell them what happened. So I'll just sort of pass it off. Or I'm afraid I'll hurt their feelings if I do what I want to do. Now you let the world know that you're afraid you'll hurt the world's feelings. Let the world know. Let the people in your life know. Let certain members of your family know. As a matter of fact, they already know. And they know exactly how to manipulate you by having their feelings hurt. How many people in your life right now, quick count, how many people in your life control you constantly because of the fear that they have generated in you that you'll hurt their feelings? Surprising, isn't it? Or you will say, I can't handle this by myself. I'll get someone who isn't afraid to do it for me. Then you'll go through life always getting someone to pull your chestnuts out of the fire. No, you're on this earth to learn how to take charge of your life moment by moment. You're here to learn how to become a non-victim. Now, there are 4 areas, or 5, in which we have a tendency to really become entrapped. And the first one is in that area that we call our body, the physical body. You see, we're afraid that if our body dies, we do, that we die. And we go through life being afraid that our body's going to die. And we get a little flutter or a little pain or a little... There was a time in my life when I was certain that I had leprosy. I'm not putting you on. Today, it doesn't matter. This body can respond in the most amazing ways. Did you know that within certain limits, within reason, you have control of the size and shape of your body? You don't have to be the victim of your body. You have control of all of its functions. And you have control of your physical health in terms of of not being concerned or not expecting to have colds or flu or high blood pressure or backaches or headaches or stomach cramps or any of those things. And if you have them, so what? It's just your body. It's not you. If your body has a little pain every now and then, that's not you. So stop letting your body victimize you. Stop letting the fear of death victimize you. Stop. You don't feel for those lumps, and if you find one, go have it checked out. But don't go around being lumpy in your mind. The second area is the area of your mental capabilities. You are far more brilliant than you've yet conceived. You haven't scratched the surface of your capability. Somewhere back there you stopped growing. You thought that when you got 18 and or 22 or graduated from Harvard, wherever it was, that you were finished and through and your education stopped, and so you just stopped it. But your mind is always wanting to wrap itself around something else and to be excited about something else. There's a genius inside you that wants to come out and live itself. Did you know that? You're not dumb and you're not limited, and you stop being victimized by the low expectations. Get excited about your life and take up typing or shorthand or whatever it is that's going to qualify you for the next exciting experience that you're going to have. There is in you an emotional genius. There's a spirit in you that does not know fear or anxiety or worry or depression. It never has. It simply cannot be victimized by a sense of tragedy. There's never been a tragedy upon the face of this earth. Now, I know you'll argue with me about that. All of these things that have occurred are natural in their time, and we can change our reactions to life. And we must. And we shall. And you have the emotional capability to be literally staunch, loving, fearless, unafraid in all of the major or minor events that occur. To walk up to any situation, standing erect and in control. Do you believe that? Well, we can't do it all the time until we do it some of the time, and we have to start now where we are in the situations that exist for us, so that the situations do not control you. You let situations control you, and I'll tell you what your emotions will be. I can predict what they will be. Tell me what the situation is, and I'll predict how the normal person responds. And that's not good enough for you. The area of your social capabilities is one in which we have limited ourselves greatly. You see, most people upon this earth have categorized themselves as either being lower or middle or upper class, as well as being depressed. Now, a low middle class depressed, anxious person will draw to them a low middle class depressed, anxious life filled with low middle class depressed, anxious people. Do you believe that? Now, look at your life. Get honest with yourself and see where you've categorized yourself. There was a time in my life when I had myself placed at not a very high level at all. And I felt very, very uncomfortable in the presence of certain very handsome, well-educated, capable, rich people, because I did not see myself at that level of life. And there was one key moment in my life when I caught myself being victimized by a man that I had never seen, nor shall I ever. It was a description, it was an introduction of such a person on a radio broadcast. And I found myself driving along and almost slinking down under the steering wheel. It was a bright, beautiful day, a happy day. And as I heard this man and his credits being given, I began to react. My inferiority, my sense of inferiority came out. Not my inferiority, I wasn't inferior. And I saw it and just almost ran off the road laughing. Because I said, I'm not going to live this way. How can someone I've never seen victimize me? It's not that person that's victimizing me. It's only my concept of myself. Now let me get that fixed. And I began to get that fixed. And I can tell you that today I'm comfortable with any human being upon the face of this earth, from low class, if there is such a thing, to the very highest. As a matter of fact, that easy chair beside the fireplace in the White House might not be comfortable enough for me. Is that ego? Absolutely not. This is my planet. It belongs to me. And upon this earth there is no human being superior or inferior to me. We are all little pinches of God stuff. That's what you are. You're a little spirit walking around, and so am I. But I've got to come to know this and to believe it and to begin to react in this way. Otherwise, I will be the victim of all kinds of things. Now, would you like to know the group of people that victimize us the most? You'll never guess. Your family. Oh, your family. 75 to 80% of the victimizers in your life are members of your family. And do they ever know how to push your button? Are you aware that most of the people who are in mental institutions, most of the disturbed people who need help, are not disturbed in the presence of strangers or neighbors? Guess where they get upset? In the presence of members of their family. They simply can't handle it. Man's inhumanity to man begins in the family circle. Now, am I putting down the family life? Of course not. But I'm saying the time has come for you and me to begin to see some of the insanity that takes place between family members. As a matter of fact, sitting right here right now, there are more than a dozen people who have all day long dreaded having to go tomorrow to the family Thanksgiving dinner. You know what's going to happen to you when you get there. You know the ones that are going to push your button and put you down. Is that correct? And you also know the insanity of it. It's almost like a day taken out of your life, almost wasted. Now, what are you going to do about it? Aha! This would be a good time to stop being a victim, would it not? And to decide that since you are going, or maybe you're not going, maybe you just decided to not go. Oh, but wait a minute, you have to go. You have to, because if you don't, you'll hurt someone's feelings. Don't you know how hurt they will be if you don't come? Well, you see how it works? Your family can become an immensely rewarding part of your life if you'll stop letting them be a disaster area, if you'll stop letting them take control of your life. Time will not permit me to get into all of the situations that pull our strings. Let me mention one more. Stop being impressed by super people. Have you ever been in a crowd and you saw just the real nice, rather innocuous looking, mild-mannered person over there, someone that you were about to walk by, until someone said, "He's a doctor." Oh, a doctor. Or a baseball player. A baseball player, which one? Who is he? Or a minister. Ministers don't seem to get that kind of a response. From time to time, I am absolutely astonished to discover that there are some people who are uncomfortable in my presence because I'm a minister and stand up here and speak. Don't let that happen to you. You are the super person who walks upon this earth, neither superior or inferior. Your lesson this week is to see and overcome one area in your life, one important area in which someone has pulled your string, and get it fixed, and come back to class next week and report to me how well you've done. Have a great week.